regarding email marketing called Email Marketing, the Publisher's Workhorse Gets a Makeover. My name is Brett Kierstead. I'm Vice President of Sales for Knowledge Marketing, and looking forward to walking you guys through this very interesting topic, one that we have a lot of information on, a lot of engagement, and not surprisingly, a lot of attendees. So this is a very large group from our normal webinar series, and we're looking forward to an engaging conversation. If you have questions along the way, please submit them through the GoToWebinar panel, and I'll try to get to them. We also, in the middle of the session today, will have a poll question, so hopefully you will engage with that and give us some feedback. I think you'll find it to be an interesting question. I'm curious to see how you guys answer it. Just a little bit of background on knowledge marketing. For those of you who are new to our monthly series, we're a technology and service provider for publishing and media companies. We have a data management platform that integrates together data with email marketing services, circulation, fulfillment and management, as well as data collection around forms. From an email service provider, why this is a subject that is knowledgeable to us based on not only what we provide as a technology partner, but what our customers do. We are a full-service email provider. Our company was founded with that as its core functionality. We sent over 1 billion publishing emails last year and plan to do even more than that in 2015. All the core services that you see from an email service provider around deliverability and monitoring services, as well as the application side of things such as templates and responsive design and the new technologies and reporting, are core services that we offer to our clients. We also are doing more and more work around data integration and API work with different technologies like content management systems, data collection, marketing automation. So this is an area of not only technology expertise, but as well as client expertise. So case studies, experiences that we see among a lot of the clients that you can see on the screen that engage with email and use it as a very strategic tool within their business. And so today I'm going to walk you through really the way we think about it is kind of the 5 S's of email. You know, of any business, you've got strategy, you've got an email segmentation ideas, the substance of what you send, the style at which you send it, and the success metrics that you use. You know, when you think about it, email has been a tool that's been around for a long, long time. But yet, here we are today wondering, are we best using it? Where do we stand with it? And what should we be doing to make optimum use of this as a strategic tool? So I'm going to cover in about 35-40 minutes because a few different topics here, a little bit of background, some kind of basic information of where we stand, trends and technologies that are out there, a little bit about data, and then really focus our time on 7 key areas from a strategic standpoint that you need to be thinking about. You know, just a background, I mean, email is a healthy business, not just for knowledge marketing, but out there as a tool that folks like you use. If you look at some projected statistics here, you know, there's especially on the B2B side, there continues to be a steady growth of the amount of emails that are expected to be sent. You know, this is on the 200 billion per day that are sent across the different business and consumer channels. You know, as we all say, you know, email is steadily climbing. It continues to be, you know, a fairly steady state with a little bit of growth in email, and hopefully you all and those out there are contributing to more targeted and successful email, not increasing email volume based on spam and other kinds of unwanted email. But again, it's a healthy business that's growing. This is a statistic. I'm not spending all this time talking about open and close rate or click rate. This is a chart I pulled off. And generally, if you look at it, this is from a group called Smart Insights. It looked at some statistics across different areas and content topics. And generally speaking, they range around a 20 to 25% open rate with a 2 to 1.9 to 2.5 or 3% click-through rate on the content in there. It varies up and down, and different areas have it, but those are general statistics that we're certainly working to improve upon where we can. I looked at a couple of studies, and it's interesting because you look at how successful and happy are people with the services that they have. So here's there's a study we saw from a company in the UK called the Destra, and it just looks at some of the folks like your satisfaction. How many companies or what percentage of people use segmentation or optimizing email for mobile. And what struck me is that a lot of these things weren't closer to 100%. I mean, you think in today's day and age with the evolution in smartness and the amount of email that's sent and the skill of folks in different organizations that there'd be a better success rate here. Even things like, how many, on the right-hand corner, company marketers who would like to do them better. They'd be better at personalization or better at segmentation. I mean, that's a lot. Most people in these areas are not really that satisfied. I mean, how many people consider themselves excellent? Only 4%. Consider themselves excellent and 37% good. So there's a lot of interesting things that I found in the research that, people aren't really satisfied by. But clearly the reason why we call this a workhorse is if you think about all the different aspects of your business, the different functions from audience development to lead gen programs to how you distribute your content, how you do research, your event marketing strategy for those of you who have events, your general circulation if you're in the print business, your direct selling activities. If you think about it, email is the workhorse. It's the engine and the tool that a lot of these operations happen, yet I think a lot of folks are starting to take some of this for granted. So today we're going to try and rekindle your thought process on how you use this as a strategic tool. When you think about trends and technologies, I always ask myself, what happened first? Did technologies change and then ideas and trends came from it, or did the trend come and then the technologies for it? But regardless, there's a hand-in-glove relationship going on here. So when you think about technologies, these are things like, oh, we have responsive design now, or you hear there's marketing automation out there as a way now, a whole set of tools that help with email and how automated that process gets from a marketing perspective. There's a lot of different strategies and techniques around how thresholds and priorities and metering of email is happening. There's mobile rendering and, dynamic content or responsive design. There's embedded video. There's new and improved data collection techniques. There's new services and technologies to improve deliverability and inbox monitoring, spam scoring, et cetera. So all of these tools and technologies are out there, and a lot of you have purchased these or have purchased email systems that over time have added these. And again, technology is wonderful, but from them comes a whole bunch of different trends and strategies. So a lot of the trends that seem to be out there when you listen to conversations that people are trying to wrestle with or trying to deal with are some of the following. Obviously personalization is a big word, and we're going to spend some time today talking about what that means, but certainly that's a trend that people are trying to strive towards. This whole quality versus quantity world, which is a never-ending battle that, again, we're going to discuss today, what people are thinking about in that area. A lot of people are trying to stem list attrition because the acquisition cost for new email is very high. And so list attrition is becoming more and more prevalent and as a decision-making criteria that a lot of you have around how you distribute email and what that list looks like. A lot of people are looking to do behavioral analysis, what's going on, opens, clicks, behaviors within your email. There's price compression. A lot of your advertisers are like, oh, just send an email, it's free. And that should be something that you can do easily because to create a print ad or some kind of visual ad takes a lot of work and is expensive, but that's not necessarily a fair representation of the work that goes on or the value that it creates. There's a lot of work going on with, you guys are dealing with spam in Canada. The Castle law is causing a lot of folks to just say, forget it. We're not even going to email Canada anymore. Too bad. And so that's a trend of consideration. Topics and integration with social networks and automating processes and A/B testing. All these are new trends and techniques that people are using in conjunction with the technologies that are available to facilitate these things. So it's actually a pretty dynamic area, but yet surprisingly, a lot of folks are just going through the motions when it comes to email. So, again, by attending this today, hopefully we're going to trigger some new ideas for you to think about. In general, my summary of email from what I see across everybody I talk to is this. It's kind of I call the overbought, underused thing. I bought a Ferrari and all I do is drive it to the grocery store. A lot of you are doing that. I don't know if you personally, but a lot of the folks we talk to, when you really dig down to are they taking advantage of the core services and functionality, a lot of them aren't. They're basically sending out kind of basic emails with basic list segmentation and suppression, with some simple level segmentation, and not necessarily thinking through all the various different ways that they can use technology and services to improve their business. So, I think it's kind of a general state of the state for not only email, but a lot of technologies is kind of the overbought, underused functionality. So let's talk about data. Data is important, and I always remind publishers who forget that data is probably one of the most powerful assets that you have as a channel, as a potential channel for advertisers and other companies. The ability to take data is so powerful, especially as a differentiator over digital-only channels. If you're Facebook or LinkedIn or all of these online content channels, if you really think about it, while they have an online audience, they have a very limited potential view of data on an individual's behavior, whereas you have all of this offline data, all of this not only print-related data or information you've collected from different sources, information from events, and all these other things that are technically not digital that can provide you with a very strong foundation for segmentation. It's more than just email and web data for email targeting. Sometimes we think, oh, let's just use their clicks or their triggers, or today's marketing automation says if they open this, then do that. Well, that's fine, but it still underutilizes an asset that you have, and it brings you back to the pack for all the other normal kind of standard digital channels. A publisher's asset, here visually we've used this before for consistency, has your demographic data, your behavioral data, your contextual data from online, offline, from print magazines, from events, from articles of reading. All of these things happen, and together they make this database in a unified manner that provides you a better foundation for how you use email. Okay, so the logic through is that all of these different parts of your business that are using email and collecting information and leveraging data should be working together in a way to make email in and of itself a more powerful tool. Okay, so don't forget that at the core of a lot of the things that we're going to talk about today, personalization, segmentation, automation, event marketing, circulation, a lot of it comes from the premise that you're a data-organized company and that you have it as an accessible resource. Speaking of data, I'm going to ask you a poll, so hopefully you will engage with this poll. I'm going to start it right now and ask you this. So if you look on your screen, this is a question that I hope you'll think about. So imagine that you have this data, okay? Brett Kierstead with an email address of 5 different email addresses. He's in your database in these 5 records, but you have 5 distinct emails. How do you count this? Do you count this as one person? Do you count this as 5 people? Or does sales count it as 5 and audience count it as 1? In all seriousness, use the poll question that I'm going to launch for you right now. And if you don't mind, just click whether you consider this, you think your organization considers this 1, 5, or 5 for sales, 1 for audience. Okay, I'll give it about 30 seconds, and I appreciate the response. Because it's something that we encounter all the time, and it is an interesting consideration when it comes to email. And it's really something that a lot of folks struggle with from a strategic standpoint, and I admit there hasn't been a ton of consensus. So I will just stop the poll since almost all of you have voted. And basically, interestingly, it looks like this. 62% of you said 1 person, 20% said 5 people, and 18% said 5 for sales, 1 for audience. So it's an interesting dilemma, and it's an interesting subject, and one that a lot of people don't think about when it comes to email strategy is even among this, although the predominant number of the group voted that this was 1 person, there wasn't consensus. 40% of the people considered this something other than what many of you might consider, well, obviously this is 1 person. So it's a really interesting topic, one for you guys to consider and just one to think about, and one we, again, continue to wrestle with our clients about how do you deal with this kind of scenario. So thank you for responding to that. So let's talk about some of these strategies. Okay, so there's 7 different areas that I want you to think about when it comes to email. And again, as I've done my research for this webinar to help educate you guys or try and give you some nuggets to take away, of all the webinars I've done, I realized that this one is very difficult. It's very difficult because there doesn't seem to be 100% consensus, and there's so many different topics once you start peeling back email to realize that there are a lot of things to consider. So I'm going to go through these as quickly as I can and give you guys maybe some provocative thoughts or hopefully some things that might give you some things to think about. So let's start with automation, okay? Automation is a very popular word, and many of you are reading articles or thinking about it or hear the word automation. And when it comes to email, I tend to like to think of it and hope you'll think about it in 2 ways. One of them is the topic of marketing automation, and the other one is the topic of process automation. Okay, I want to break these down. Last month we did a webinar on marketing automation. It's a very popular topic, and there was a lot of interesting ideas that people had sent to me afterwards about this subject. And when I think about marketing automation, hold on. Thanks for the comment. Hopefully I hid the poll results. When it comes to marketing automation, a lot of you said, yeah, we get it. You know, it's funny how hyped it is, and it's this whole logical if-then sequence about how, you know, somebody sends out this email and then this happens and then this happens, and it's really all of these different functions go on. But in reality, what marketing automation is, it's not necessarily an efficiency gainer. Because basically what you're saying is marketing automation is a way of taking a sequential set of steps that you think around email. Maybe these next 10 things are going to happen in sequence, and moving them all to as many as possible to the front of the process so that you don't have to worry about doing them later, and in effect you can improve some of the performance of your campaigns. But it's not necessarily an efficiency gain. It's just a reallocation and maybe a better improvement about your results, but you still have to do all the work. Okay? What I see more people trying to figure out is what I would consider process automation. Because when you think about what goes into all of the different email campaigns, and we have some customers that send 100 campaigns a day, and these campaigns can come from all over the enterprise. What they're really looking to do is squeeze time out of the process. And you think about what goes into an email, you have everything from the creation of it, to list selection, to the scheduling of it, to your suppression decisions, to how you want to configure the content within that, to how you want to determine priorities of email, if there's conflicts on who gets it. You have deliverability considerations. You have thresholds. In other words, can somebody only see a certain number of emails a day, and do we need to check for that? Spam scoring as a process, do we want to review that? How do we want it to be rendered? You know, what do we have to go through an exercise to check our rendering? Do we know in advance this is a marketing automation component, like a response sequence, if this, trigger that, do this? I mean, those are pre-considerations that we want to have. You know, we've got reporting and who sees the results. We've got list hygiene and opt-out considerations. What do we have to do? So when you think about an email, I'm sure your executives or people or even your customers don't think about all the work you put into it to make it a successful endeavor. But again, customers are trying to look at this and say, all right, are we really understand what that process looks like? And in the publishing media world, where they're finding a lot of the answers is marrying in a more seamless way the relationship between the content management system and the email system. Because in the past, without this relationship, a lot of folks were ended up creating content and then recreating it elsewhere. And it almost took an editorial person and a marketing person extra steps in time as opposed to trying to figure out a way to simplify the communication from a data perspective and content between these different tools. So a lot of the API work and a lot of time is being spent on hooking up folks like Drupal and WordPress to email service providers like Knowledge Marketing, everything from the timing of it and manner at which lists are selected and groups are assigned and suppression lists are applied, how content is, rendered within the content management system for pre-approval so it doesn't have to be recreated in there, how reporting data is sent back in an automated manner from the email system back to the content management system for editorial review. All of these individual processes are being re-looked at as a way to improve efficiency of delivery and execution. And so whereas, it used to be you had to have, as a service provider, 100 unique and clever templates, now more people, especially in publishing, think, I don't care. I just want to create my content in one place and have it automatically delivered without a second round of intervention. So I'd say process automation is improvement as much as marketing automation. Okay, let's move on to personalization. So personalization, again, we've talked about this before, so I'll be quick through it. Personalization is something like this. So if your general list has all farmers, if your specialized list has pig farmers, a personal one is Joe the pig farmer from Iowa, okay? Personalization in email has evolved beyond just what I called, in this case, Dear Brett personalization. It's putting my name in there and trying to assume that I'm in some kind of category is really kind of an outdated way of doing personalization. So it used my name, but that doesn't necessarily make the content relevant to me. What we like to use, and a lot of our customers are thinking of, is what we call peopleization, which is the way of taking multiple people that are grouped together. So using all the information that you have across an individual's profile to make that email experience as personalized and appropriate for as small a group as commercially possible, right? You're not going to create 1 million individual emails if you have 1 million people, but you can make some logical organizations of people into groups to create a, quote, personalized message. So a newsletter like this, you all have these newsletters and content. This is Global Golf Post. It's like a weekly newsletter. There are content subjects and boxes that exist within here that allow you an opportunity to create groups of personalization. So, you've got ads blocks, you've got article blocks, you've got pictures and images. Every one of these is being configured in a manner that might use some attribute of the individual recipient. You can look at their profile data, you can look at maybe their geography. We have customers that place ad blocks or content blocks based on a geography of the recipient. You have company type. Some folks want a message only to Fortune 100 or top 100 retailers or Fortune 2000. There's personalization on that by groups of people. Content preference. Do they have a particular topic of interest? Device type personalization and customization. You have timing. Maybe you're segmenting out and looking at groups of people that open in a specific time and sending a personalized message based on a time of day responsiveness. Behavioral response, we all know this. If they open this, then send them a second message which says something about, well, thank you for opening. We want to personalize the response. Ads based on it. A lot of our customers are trying to manage their ad blocks to be different. So in a newsletter, perhaps, that you send out through email, maybe one of the ad blocks has a particular advertiser message based on an individual profile. A second profile is created, and then a secondary ad block is sold. So there's a lot of different personalization going on there and customization based on this information. And the way a lot of people look at it is they might say, hey, we might have one version that is for 50,000 people just based on a profile. We might segment it down based on behavioral attributes, contextual topics. We might have a different segmentation list. So we're trying to find ways of logically grouping people in a people mode as opposed to only solely trying to create 1 million different permutations of an email. A good way I like to think about it, and I've got this advice from others, is think of it this way. People say, oh, we got to send as many emails as possible, but a good way to sell it to your internal constituents as well as to your advertisers is this. Large volume groups of email is generally used for branding and awareness. A new product launch, something on a broad level, we're just looking to educate people via email on something that's new. If you get into a segmented world, a very profile, you want to start maybe honing that down into some specific groups, maybe targeting groups of farmers as we use or something more specific. Generally, what people use that for is some kind of a general response. It's not necessarily a lead conversion, but maybe it's a survey, maybe it's a research piece of data, even something as simple as maybe a webinar. If you really want to get down to a high lead conversion, and you want to get a high rate of performance of action against that particular email, you need to be as targeted as possible, as behaviorally targeted. Like we said, some of these techniques around their profile, their topical interests, their frequency of click, the kind of content that they read, those kinds of segmentation are really highly desired when you want a highly action response. You're going to convert somebody into a lead. Okay? They all work. It's just different use cases. You don't have to get away from large volume sending. You just have to be smarter about how you do it. We had a client of ours, Lamar Friedman in New York, who made the comment that they did list segmentation. They just looked at topics of interest. So they sent an email out that corresponded to people that had previously engaged with a similar content topic, and they had a 25% conversion rate versus their normal 7% conversion on a broader send. So, I mean, these work intuitively, and they seem to work in practice when you're more strategic about how you send content. Okay, let's move on to lead programs. This is a great quote. A really smart CEO that I met with in the last few weeks had this quote. It was interesting about leads or action. He said, "Our organization still sees email as a reach vehicle versus a response vehicle." And I thought that was a fascinating concept around what is our goal. Is it to blast as many people as we can with as much information, which is a reach strategy, or is it a response strategy? We want to be very targeted because we want to get people to do things. Okay, so lead programs specifically are really changing from kind of a list rental mindset, which is still a good idea. I mean, list rental as a concept is good. It's just the execution of it is changing. People are trying to, instead of one-time use, they're trying to take targeted email distributions and use them as part of a campaign, whether that's an internal one that you're doing for various different programs or whether it's for a third-party program. There's a lot of different ways at trying to generate, quote, leads for others. Segmentation is always very critical. We've talked about this in any lead program. People are looking in their lead program at different decision points. So some of you will say, oh, I'm not just going to deliver a leads to my advertisers. I'm going to say, look, we're going to deliver them over maybe 3 different sends with different sequences and different considerations based on where we think that individual is in the buying cycle. Kind of a consumer mindset in B2B as opposed to just simply giving a general name. Again, a lot of our customers are wanting to make sure if you're doing third-party lead programs especially that they're segmenting out those names and those programs outside of their normal editorial send. I hope you all are not sending for third-party client lists and third-party content through your editorial accounts. It's a great way to ruin your IP credibility. So hopefully you're segmenting out how you send email that comes from either third-party lists or third-party content. And lastly, again, on leads, it still continues to be a problem that we're not getting great follow-up on a lot of these leads you're creating. So I'm going to ask you another thought experiment. You could think about this and ask this of yourself and your business, because I think it's, again, another fascinating area where no one seems to have consensus, and that is the following. If you are contracted out by a third party for a lead campaign, let's say one of your largest advertisers says, I'd like for you to do a lead campaign to your audience. And you start with a very targeted and qualified list. You listen to their profiles, they tell you who they want, geography, all the great things. You come up with this awesome list. Let's say it's 5,000 names, okay? And they pay you to send that out. Then what happens is some open your email, right? Some click on the links within that, let's say, content, and then some convert as desired. In other words, let's say your advertiser links them over to one of their pages. They fill out some form. Yes, I'd like more information on this advertiser. The end, right? There's your sequence. So here's the question that I ask you to think about for yourself. Because a lot of customers ask me, and I always turn around and ask them, you tell me. So here's the following. Which of these do you consider as leads? Is it only the people on the right? What about people that clicked that didn't convert? Is that a lead? Is it a lead internally, or is it a lead for your advertiser? What do you do in part 2 on this campaign? Again, a lot of folks are used to one-time list rentals. They use a list, they send out a campaign, either converts or doesn't, and then they kind of stop there. But what's next in this? You know, what kind of data do you capture from this? There's so much information that email allows you to create, the footprint that people live when they click and open and read. It's so powerful, but a lot of people are underutilizing the data. Do you treat all these people the same afterwards? You know, hopefully you don't. Hopefully you think about, for future campaigns, segmenting out on these different criteria, but do you treat them all the same? Do you provide supplemental data? You know, a lot of folks hand over the lead. It's a very stripped down lead, or they only provide the advertiser with some basic information. But what about other data you have? You have a wealth of data on an individual. Are you sending them more? Are you sending them little? So it's an interesting, compelling question that a lot of folks are asking is there more money to be made there through this email lead program if you provide additional data? How do you deliver the leads? People will come up to me all the time and say, I'd like we'd like to know if you can deliver leads automatically to the advertiser that we generate from email campaigns. I'm like, are you sure? You want us to automatically send over to advertisers leads that you generate? And they're like, well, actually, no, the salesperson wants to review them, and we want to scrub them, and we want to make sure. So there's a lot of considerations about how you deliver your email-generated leads that folks haven't really thought fully through when they come to these ideas of automation. And then lastly, when you look at this program, what do you charge for? What aspects along the way? How do you charge for this model? You know, is it purely a lead model or whatever? Again, a lot to think about. The general prevailing idea, we've used this before, the smaller the slice, the higher the price. It's a prevailing attitude that if you're basically providing general information and lead data, it comes at X cost. But as you get more specific and you drill down more, there's a multiplier effect for the value of information that you provide. Couple of quick ones here. Events, you know, hopefully people are doing this. When your event marketing people are using email to generate interest in an event, it's a good tool for that. Typically it's done over a multi-part campaign. You know, hey, we have a big event next fall. We're going to set up a sequence of email activity over a multiple month campaign. That's a good use of automation because every time someone comes into the database, you want to automatically send them something. So there's some nice automation techniques around event marketing. Segmentation and personalization is important, and geography is important too. And the PSA that I have on this is please sync your status. If I'm already registered for an event, please don't send me another invite asking me to come to the event that I'm already registered for. And also this one, which I've shared before, the worst thing I always hear is when you have in-market live events and they send you an email saying, join us for, you know, your event in New York tomorrow. And I live in Minnesota. It's almost 1,800 miles away, and it's $1,000 to get an overnight ticket. I'm not coming to your event tomorrow, so please segment me out. It doesn't do any good to the brand for email to send me that information. You know, a lot of customers like to do these kinds of scenarios where they get in a visual representation and plot audience members on a geography, segment out on a geographic radius, send personalized emails for in-market events on a very localized basis. It's just a good way to really use email as a last-minute, low-cost marketing and recruitment tool, but just don't abuse it so that you send so many out that it's inappropriate to the recipient, because next month they're going to tune you out. Circulation audience, that group is very active with email. You know, as circulation people are changing now into more audience marketing. You know, they're looking to use email as potentially a way to reduce the costs of requalifications or meeting your audit and growth goals, you know, as opposed to starting fresh every audit cycle with external lists or telemarketing firms. They're looking to use email and data as a way to streamline and cut some of that cost out. You know, forms and data collection is really important between forms and email group, and there's a lot of different ways that people are using lists for creativity. You know, for example, people are going in and saying, hey, I want to look at all my email newsletter recipients, and I'm comparing it to my print subscriber lists, and then I'm using email as a way to market to those newsletter subscribers to get them to convert to be print subscribers. So again, email is being used by audience and circ as a way to kind of streamline potentially the referral and audit goals and marketing process as a first strategy, as opposed to, you know, immediately going to the higher cost telemarketer. Suppression opt-out, we could spend, the more time I spend on this, we could spend an hour on this subject, but I'll kind of give you some things to think about. Suppression opt-out rules is basically the rules of content engagement. It defines how you deliver content, and me as a recipient, how I can choose to get it or not get it. You know, it absolutely is a strategic initiative. We spend a ton of time with our customers talking through this because there's not only legal considerations like in Canada, but there's also policy. You know, there's deliverability and reputation considerations. And the more products and channels they have, the more complex it is. And ultimately, everyone wants to strike a balance of convenience and impact. And what I mean by that is we might look at it and say, okay, you know, a publisher has all of these channels that they send from, but then they've got accounts, they've got their newsletters, their marketing messages, their third-party sends, they've got event marketing, they've got circulation-related email. And then within every one of those, they've got different newsletters or advertiser sends. And the configurations and decisions that you guys make on this are really, really important. Again, service providers like Knowledge Marketing and others have the technology. You have to go through and think about this because if someone gets something that they don't want, you know, how do you want to allow them to opt out? Do you want them to opt out at the product level, at the newsletter level, at the company level? All of these are considerations that you need to think about as interesting strategies. You know, thresholds and priorities are another one. How many emails can somebody get in a day? And if I get multiple emails, if I'm scheduled to get 7 emails from you as a publisher, which is probably likely, if you're doing event marketing on me, you're doing editorial to me, you're sending me third-party lead programs, how do you decide what the priorities are? Because as we said before, it's so expensive right now for list acquisition that you can't afford to be sending me things unthoughtfully. So some strategic questions you should ask yourself around how this is structured is, you know, do you allow opt-in to all emails? Is it by type, by advertiser? You know, when do you remove somebody from the list? If you sent them it for 7 months in a row and no one's clicked on it, do you keep them on there? Do you still count them? Some people purge that list and others don't. You know, you don't have the same rules as an audit for your print magazines. You have more liberty on the e-newsletter side, but when do you do it? What's a fair representation? How do you re-engage people via email that are inactive? You know, when somebody signs up for your print magazine or your digital newsletters, which ones do you put them on? Do you put them on multiple lists, and why? You know, we have some customers that will say, okay, you get this magazine, we say we subscribe you to 4 or 5 related newsletters, and we let them unsubscribe. Now, that may not work in Canada. Whether it's right or wrong, a lot of folks do it different ways. You know, what's the daily email limit for an individual? You know, should you send them, and which takes priority? You know, do you have a preferences page? I love this one. Everybody's like, yep, we want to set up a preferences page so people can see all the things that they're subscribed to and all that they can. And I'm like, okay, well, so when people just go through and go click, 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 and they unclick everything, or they nuclear option and get themselves off everything, are you happy with that? Can you live with that? Because a lot of people will say, yes, it's a convenience to our customers, okay, but maybe all of a sudden people that you wanted to unsubscribe from third party only, all of a sudden conveniently gun themselves off of every editorial. Is that good or is that not good? I mean, again, these aren't automatic decisions for everybody. These are strategic questions that email services allow you to contemplate. You just have to decide, what do you want to do? Okay, and lastly, email as a service. This is kind of a fun ending. Think about it this way, guys. You guys send significant amounts of email and are pretty strategic with it. You do it for content distribution. You do it for third party. You do a lot of email for people. And you, as I showed you in the statistics before, a lot of people that even have a lot more money than you, big corporate companies, big brands, don't necessarily think that they are experts at email. They have the same level of savvy as you do. They have the same content creation, and they have the same direct marketing resources. You know, a lot of them don't. And that's partly why they advertise with you in the first place, because you not only have the list, but you have expertise. But the idea here is can you start offering something that is more of a service? Okay, lead programs have been sold by you guys for a long time as one-time things. You need leads, advertiser, rent our list, we'll send an email, congratulations, okay? It's not necessarily something that you're thinking about as a service, but again, they're not necessarily doing a good job of direct marketing to their list, whether it's their customers, whether it's their prospects. They don't necessarily have that competence either. So some of our customers that are publishers are saying, look, we want to start thinking about offering email as a service to our clients, not just emails, but email as a service, okay? It's a way for you to maybe get service revenue beyond just ad revenue. It's a way to help customers that maybe not understand, advertisers that aren't strong with loyalty marketing or don't have good end customer engagement. They don't have really strong data profiles. Maybe you're a partner for them. And I'll give you a quick example. One of our customers, NorthStar, who are sharp folks, if you ever get a chance to talk to them on their strategies, they do some cool stuff. But they have a couple of examples where they're becoming not only a advertising and content partner, but as a service partner. So they will say, look, we're offering you as a brand a email and data services. So they might take that customer's advertising strategy, their upstream customers' newsletter distribution, their creative, the creative that they create to send out messages, any educational emails that brand might want to send, membership management. Hey, thanks for your renewal. Here's your renewal email for your association membership. Maybe there's product fulfillment emails. A lot of your upstream customers communicate with their customers through email. And you guys have probably experienced crappy email experiences from brands. Well, why don't you stick your nose in the middle of that as a way to make additional money? Okay? You also have better lists. You're better at data hygiene management. Your publishing background has taught you to be very stringent about list quality. And you've got so much data. So an interesting use case that's emerging is moving beyond being someone that an advertiser calls to send an email one time to being somebody that provides them a strategic service around how that brand uses email to communicate with their customers and prospects. Okay, so 5 things. Review your overall email strategy. This has actually been an exciting exercise for me, and I hope it will be for you too, to just go back and revisit email. Don't just think of it as this stodgy old content delivery service or fulfillment service. There's a lot of interesting things going on technology-wise, and a lot of interesting options for you strategically. Look at your technology and resources second. Most email providers, be it knowledge marketing or whoever else is out there, have enough technology for you. Where, kind of the Ferrari grocery store analogy before. Come up with some really interesting and clever ways strategically on how you want to start using email in a more, strategic and aggressive manner. Then look at the technology as a way to complement that. No matter what, get your data organized. If you think about everything we've talked about today, a lot of it is dependent on the ability to do segmentation. In that survey I said more than half of you, if you're representative of the group, are unhappy with your ability to leverage sophisticated data to do these programs. So make sure your data is in order. Again, marketing automation is sexy, but process automation improves your everyday life. Taking time, if you're running 50 campaigns a day, taking a couple of minutes off every one has a multiplier effect in terms of how efficient and effective you can be. It's not as glamorous to go in and look at process, but it can provide you with equally or greater return as far as business operations go. I always say executives don't always care about how hard your life is, but you do. So if you go back and look at some of your technology options and processes, there's maybe a way to cut some time out of how you do this every day. And lastly, don't forget economics. There's a lot of ways that people are trying to rethink the price side of email because people are starting to think of it as, oh, it's easy. You push a button and it's free. But as you guys know behind the scenes, there's a lot of thought that goes into the work, and there's a lot of data that you can get from it, and there's a lot of conversions, and there's a lot of gain that an advertiser as well as an internal person in marketing can get from doing this properly. So again, I don't have all the answers. I hopefully gave you guys some things to think about. If you're out and about, those of you that are customers on the phone, we'll see you in a couple weeks at our first user conference. We're going to go deep into email and data and circulation and all the fun things out there. We're going to be at DrupalCon for those of you who are Drupal users that want to happen to venture out to LA to talk about the integration between content management and email and all the efficiencies that are there. And then we'll also be at ABM and SIAA event in June here coming up in DC. So hopefully we'll see you out there. I ran over on my time. I said it'd be 45 minutes. We're right on it. There's a couple of questions that came in. I'll respond to them on email. Those of you that asked for slides and things like that, we definitely make those available for people as well as a recording for today. So again, thanks guys, everyone so much. We'll see you all again next month as part of our monthly webinar series, and again, hopefully we'll see you out on the road these various different events. Take care, and everyone have a great day. Thanks.